All right, so here we are. We sit on June 2nd. The Bruins do not have a coach for next season. What are you hearing in terms of the process?
I think it could be imminent, Fred. If you look back at last week, Wednesday, Mitch Love interviewed in person. Thursday, Jay Leach interviewed in person. And then Friday, Marco Sturm, old friend, interviewed in person. So I don't know what took place before that. I don't know what, if anything, is scheduled for after in terms of in-person interviews for these folks with any other candidates, any other finalists. But those are three legitimate down to the wire finalists. So if you look at it from that perspective, then perhaps the whole process of doing the in-person interviews is winding down if it hasn't already concluded. So what's left to make a decision?
All right. Was Joe Sacco given any consideration at all?
That I don't know. Don Sweeney said earlier in the offseason that Joe would be included in a final group of coaches. That was the line. So what does that mean? Does that mean that he was among the finalists? I don't know. But he was given consideration. I just don't know if he was included in that last tier.
Okay, so we've seen other teams hire coaches, and what, based on the finalists, does it seem that the Bruins are looking for?
I think they at least those three that I know of, those three finalists, they fit a certain profile. Marco Sturm, 46, Jay Leach, 45, Mitch Love, 40. They're relatively young. We're not talking the Mike Sullivan, the Peter Laviolette, the folks that have been around and have been able to really, especially with Peter, you look at that track record of being able to get teams and really push them toward that last tier of competitiveness. None of these guys has been an NHL head coach. They have all had head coaching experience in the American League. Jay was Providence, Marco with Ontario, LA's affiliate, and then Mitch Love was with Calgary for 2 years in their American League farm clubs. So who are these folks? These are up and coming coaches. They are not necessarily they haven't been around in terms of NHL experience, but they are young, they're dynamic, they're good communicators, they are progressive thinkers in terms of video, in terms of data, in terms of analytics. And I think they fit the profile, guys, of somebody who will grow in unison with the players and the team and the organization around them. Let's face it, okay, you can talk all you want about you have Pastrnak, you have McAvoy, you have Swayman, and with those players, those foundational players, perhaps this team can get right back into the playoffs next year. We'll see. But the facts are that this was the fifth worst team in the league. And they have a prospect pool that has been replenished to some point, but not to a point where any team would be comfortable. And who is that next tier of players coming up? It's hard to see. So you bundle that all in. This is not the Florida Panthers. This is a team that we don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. We don't. It all depends on what they do at the draft, July 1st. Whatever happens after, there's still a lot of roster building to take place. So you look at that and you look at the coach. I think they grow in lockstep.
How does Sweeney's extension impact this decision? Because, okay, he got the extension, but it's only for 2 years. How much of that is going to factor into his thoughts on this and for the team as a whole and the structure going forward?
Well, it's such a critical hire for Don and for the organization that if, okay, let's say, let's say things don't start off well for whoever the new coach is. Well, who's going to pay the price? Yes, Don has 2 additional years of security going through 2028, but let's say 2020 this upcoming season, okay, well, whatever happens, but then what if it bleeds into the next year? Well, then who's going to be made accountable? Most likely it's going to be Don. So yes, I think it builds in some security, but we all knew that this was going to be under Don's watch in terms of trying to rebuild here, just because, like, what organization would say, okay, green light, Don, here's go trade your captain, go trade Frederick, go trade Brazo, go trade Carlo, Coyle, go on down the line, and then we're going to hand it off. That wasn't going to happen. Like, regardless of whether he was entering his last season of his contract, of his previous contract, without an extension in place. Like, this was Don's project to see through. So, yes, some security there, but again, this is this has shifted. It's not going to be on the coach again. I don't think he's going to be in a position to make another dismissal. That this is under his watch, and it's his job to execute it and see it through.
Having gotten some distance between the end of the regular season and now, do you feel any differently about the way the Bruins would attack free agency, or you still feel the same way?
Well, I think that's their most viable and credible and really most reasonable path toward rebuilding, because, okay, maybe they still have a few assets in place that you can use for trade. For example, like Pavel Zacha kind of fits that profile of a good player under reasonable contract for, I think he still is under for 2 or 3 years, multi-position player, and those are valuable. But then you look at it from the Bruins perspective, how many NHL players are they short right now? I'd say like they have to get a half dozen, like legit real NHL varsity players, and he's absolutely one of them. He's top 6 forward for this team all day. So you look at it from that perspective, like I don't know that they're in a position to trade. And you brought in all these future assets, like you're not going to trade like the first round pick you got for Brad from Florida right now. Like these are still pieces that you need to rebuild the prospect pool. So, like every team, they're going to have money available, more money available with the cap going up. Perhaps there's a design for an offer sheet if they see somebody that's vulnerable in terms of being closer to the cap than they are. But yeah, legitimately, like spending is the way to go on July 1st. And we saw like that didn't really go their way last July 1st. So there's risk involved.
Yeah, and the biggest name out there is Mitch Marner. He's the one that everyone's writing about right now. What do you think the price on him would be, and where do you think that he's someone that you should spend a lot of money on based on where you are in this kind of retool?
I think he'll be the highest paid player. What Draisaitl, I think, is at 14 million with the cap going up, and like how often do you hear? You don't see players like that become available. He is like, can you imagine having Pastrnak one shift and then follow up with Marner the second shift, and he does so many things. Okay, you can say like that player and the rest of his Toronto teammates didn't get it done for how many years in the playoffs, but that's an incredible talented skill set there. So yeah, you have to inquire. Now, is it worth it to spend so much of your capital on one player when you're in this position? That's really hard to say. How you have to weigh in how much of an impact does one player make versus, let's say, 3 or 4 that you can get, certainly lower tier, but again, going like how many players, like what is it, 5? I think they have 5 forwards under contract right now for next year. So just so many holes to fill in terms of real NHL players. And as the playoffs show every year, like what makes a difference? Of course it's stars, but it's also depth. There's no depth to be seen for the Bruins right now.
Would David Pastrnak be upset if they brought someone in that made so much more money than him?
I hadn't thought of that. I don't think so. I remember talking to David when he was going through his negotiation, his last year of his deal, and he could have made a case. Like I remember asking him, do you want to be the highest paid player in the league? And he said no, that wasn't a priority, and proof goes to show that it wasn't. Like I think he could have really made a case. Like imagine if he had gotten to July 1st that year, not re-signed. Like how many teams would raise their hands for David? So I don't know. He just strikes me, and you guys know what type of personality he is. He's just always a smile, always like never a bad day at the rink. Just comes to do his job. I think he's kind of just his own lane. Just I'm happy here. I'll do my thing. If somebody else is getting paid way more, so be it.
All right. Well, Fluto, it's going to be an interesting time as we wait on the coach and anticipate July 1st. Thank you so much for the time. Everyone read Fluto in The Athletic.
Bye, guys.
If you like that clip, check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. For more Bruins analysis and opinion, hit this playlist.